Hello, I'm Shelley Rothus, and I'm a different kind of victim. Today's topic is going to be Part 6 continued, and it's Conditioned Normalized Assholism Syndrome. This should be good. First, I'm going to overview as to what I went over in Part 6 continued based on Conditioned Normalized Victimization Syndrome. So I had basically mainly read, it was an overview based upon that, and it was describing mainly my relationship with Ken and how he is a part of my story and what had happened during the time and how I responded and how my responses were similar to how I responded with my, I'll call them, 3 assaholics. My friend Brian, he gave me a new word. He said, called them assaholics. So, okay, I'll try to remember that. He likes that better than 3 abusers, so 3 assaholics. That sounds good. So anyways, back to the overview. I also had brought up how rape culture should be domestic violence culture. So I'll give an example of how that is. Okay, in one of my videos based upon domestic violence culture, I had brought up the time that I had been raped when I was 15, and I was drugged and raped, and I had mentioned that I was mainly afraid of telling my parents because of fear that they would blame me and I would get punished. So I did end up telling my sister, as I stated, and how did she respond? The one person that I thought I could trust the most out of the people I had a choice to tell ends up doing the opposite. Gee, sounds familiar. We'll get to that. So she ends up accusing me of being a drug addict, and even years later, when I mentioned the rape and tried to talk about it with her, she had said, "Shut up, Shelley. You were never raped." That's how she said it to me. Jeez, sounds familiar, doesn't it? So, now, I'll relate that to the situation with Ken. So, like I had mentioned in Part 6 continued of the last video, is that Ken was the first person that I felt comfortable opening up to. Was I afraid? Yeah, not as much as I was of telling my parents or sister about being raped, because actually, like I stated, I had a little bit more expectations of Ken based upon of who I thought he was, of course. So I'm gonna have to separate the friendly dork to the self-centered prick. It's gonna have to go that way, because I really don't know. So, anyways, the first thing I went to him about was being bullied, and then I had gotten viciously attacked by my assaholics dog, and they didn't want me to tell anybody. They tried to control me and would get mad at me and told me not to even tell a doctor. I was trying a lot of things to try to get to heal, and it wasn't working. So I was a little bit nervous, but I actually felt like Ken would be the best bet to even just open up a little bit. And I did it, edged in a little bit. And I asked him what I could do to get it to heal. He gave me advice, and he responded well. And then I felt a little bit safer, and because it's happened before that. So I did end up telling him again other incidents that happened, because I thought that I was safe enough to talk to him about it. So how did that end up? Just like it did with my sister, after opening up and telling her that it was hard enough for me to say in the first place, because I was ashamed and that even happened to me. It was really hard for me to accept based on what my 3 assaholics have done to me. And open up and tell Ken that. And like I said, I told Ken more than I even told people in the mental health field in detail. So he ended up being in a hate group again and using it against me. Basically, like my sister also accused me of lying and then degrading me and whatnot. And then on top of it, humiliating me. So that goes along with what I had discussed before as to when a victim does open up to you and how you respond to it. And the way that Ken responded actually traumatized me in that way too. As you can see, what happened with my sister with the rape and how she responded and how she treated me and degraded me and, whatnot. Exactly what Ken did. So that's another reason why it traumatized me so badly. Like I said, one bad thing can happen and something that's similar to it can happen that can really traumatize somebody really badly. And that's exactly what happened. So, lies out of omission. Of course, Ken was lying to me, and like I stated, the relationship was the most fake that I've ever had, besides the 3 assaholics, I should say. So that's the term that my friend Brian wants me to use, so I'm going to try to remember. It's hard to change your, what you've been calling somebody, so 3 assaholics. Okay, so anyways, lies out of omission. Now, how does that relate to my personal story? When I was falsely Baker acted, of course my sister knew that it was based on lies, but guess what? She still went and visited me while I was in the mental institute, falsely Baker acted, pretending like she cares about me, just like she does on the phone. Oh, I love you, Shelley, you're the best sister, blah, blah, blah. All fake. Just like, I can't say for the entire time that I knew Ken, but for a good part of it, especially during the time that I opened up to him, it was fake, and he was lying to me. So he basically did what my sister did, is he pretended like he cared. He pretended like he actually cared about me and that he was, being a good friend, when all along it was just a big lie. And you can see why that hurt me too, because all the lies in the past of what they've done to me. And then somebody that, like I stated, I even had more expectations of Ken over my 3 assaholics, which made it even harder on me. So, as you see, is that domestic violence culture is what it should be. That rape culture and domestic violence culture, it's all abuse. That's another thing that I've been seeing brought up even by victims themselves as to what is abuse, what should be reported. Well, okay, see, that's a huge problem. As you see, even victims don't get this. So when you sit there and say, well, if it's not physical abuse, then even though if you're going to go by the law, which a lot of them do, even victims, they'll say, well, by law you're supposed to report this. Well, you know what, just like I stated, just remember, slavery used to be legal. So you see somebody being verbally, emotionally, psychologically abused, for you to go by the law based upon your opinion as to how bad that is, that type of abuse, is not a good thing. Because what does that do? That is part of domestic violence culture. And that's a big problem as to why even DV shelters are having trouble with the law and making verbal, emotional, and psychological abuse to be seen just as bad as physical. Because you know what? They're all interrelated. The physical abuse, like I had stated, is that when the dog bit me, I was being honest. I said, this hurts a heck of a lot less than the emotional abuse, like I said to my father. And that's pure honesty. Because what happens with physical abuse? It's the pain that happens after, the emotional pain and suffering that that victim goes through that hurts more than that strike or punch or whatever. Because that lasts a lot longer and it's harder to deal with as for healing. Because what's the thoughts, just like with ghosting. So even words, yes, words can hurt, but when somebody doesn't say anything and it's just, ignoring somebody, that could be even more painful. Many people don't want to admit it. They'll say, well, words hurt, but you know what? Yes, physical abuse, being hurt physically hurts, emotionally hurts too, and even being ignored. So, verbal, physical, and even being ignored. They're all abuse. And when we sit there and try to say which one is worse, all that does is make abuse in all areas get worse. So it's time that we make a change. Like I stated, is that the mental health field has a lot of flaws. We sit there and we point fingers at the law, saying that they're trained different than us and that we should take care of it because we're better, we know better, we'll be able to handle it better as for emotionally and helping the victim. Well, guess what? The mental health field has many flaws, and we need to be pointing the fingers at us too, because there's a lot of things that we need to change in order to actually effectively help victims in abuse in effective ways. So the next part is conditioned, normalized assholism syndrome. This is going to be good. Those who regularly use abusive behaviors within any type of relationship have normalized these unacceptable responses by habitually using unacceptable behaviors or actions they taught themselves to use as a means to benefit from the relationships they choose to have in their life. One important aspect about abusive behaviors or actions is to know and understand that we are capable of making choices and decisions as for what behaviors or actions we choose to use within our relationships. There is no brain disorder that scientifically proves that there is a physical cause for a human to have uncontrollable abusive behaviors or actions. This is my new term to replace the well-known mental illness, narcissistic personality disorder. Narcissistic personality disorder is a mental health condition in which people have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance. They need and seek too much attention and want people to admire them. People with this disorder may lack the ability to understand or care about the feelings of others. Now, this term automatically gives all abusers the excuse and exception for their unacceptable actions or behaviors that they choose to use on others. So, how is that so? Excuses and exceptions, saying that they can't understand, or don't have the ability to understand how they are hurting others. Please spare me. Anybody who has asked an abuser or have known them, they themselves will talk about situations where they have been hurt by others that had done abusive behaviors on them. So if you're able to have those feelings, like when we're teaching children based on feelings, we explain it to them in their ways as to understand. So one way that we could do that is explaining to them how they feel on the inside when somebody says something mean to them. By understanding that, it's teaching them that they shouldn't do that to others because they know how it feels and how bad it feels. I'll bring Ken into it. Now, Ken has had issues in relationships that he's brought up and mentioned things. Yet, he himself has done certain things that he had scolded them about. So, he himself has been hurt in relationships. So, he does know what he does and that it actually hurts another person. Same with the 3 alcoholics. They've been in situations where they were hurt by people that they trusted and were in relationships with. So they know too what it feels like to be hurt. And no, they don't like it. Just like their victims don't like it. So excuses and exceptions are not a good thing. Also, making up a word, saying, okay, well, there's the mental health, field, little group that they have that, comes up with terms for the DSM-4 and 5 and blah, blah, blah. Keep on going on. They change it. They drop this out, It's just like the law. But there's, like I stated, there's no scientific evidence for, most of those mental illnesses, There's no, blood test, or brain test, okay. So it's important, even with the mental health field, to be careful based upon what they come up with as for, mental illnesses that they, or even words or how they say the words. Like I said, I don't believe in survivor mode and, blah, 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 because it doesn't actually give positive outcomes based upon it. Just like this definition for, what an abuser is, narcissistic, that they don't have the ability. That's given excuses and exceptions. And that's where I stand strong behind my favorite teacher, Professor Dyer, is taking responsibility for your chosen actions or behaviors based on CBT. We all should do it. Not just abusers, everybody. And that takes having personal integrity and being the bigger person. I will use my favorite teacher, Patrick Dyer, to describe how and why this term actually enables and encourages abuse to continue and get worse within society as a whole. I will start off with a short story about what I learned about this in my class based on substance abuse. Professor Dyer loved to use mnemonics to help his students remember important information based on what we were learning about. Well, Professor Dyer is going to kick my butt because I don't remember the mnemonic for this, but I do remember what it means. So the story is quite funny because I had missed out on part of the information he gave during class. So I asked him after class, and Professor Dyer always did love giving us a hard time. Ha ha ha. Anyways, he did tell me what it means. It was based on the flaws within the programs used for those with substance abuse or dependency issues. The programs known as Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous use a treatment based on how long you have been clean. So the problem with that is when a person ends up using a substance even only one time, they end up feeling like they are a failure and ashamed of themselves. So the outcome often is that a person will turn back to their substance abuse or dependency because of those negative beliefs that they have placed on themselves. So, how's that similar? When we give people a mental illness as though it's physical, they can't do anything about it. Their brain, it's in their brain that's, all, everything that we say is true based on the mental health field, So if somebody actually believes that, okay, well, I'm an abuser, I can't help it, I'm not going to be able to, so it's in my head, I'm just mean by nature, I was born that way. No, because that's just making excuses and exceptions. Just like what I just went over as for Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous, it's the same thing. Because the problem with that is that when people go by how many days they've been clean, like say they've been clean for a year, and then they have one little sip, because that's like the, rule. Like, you can't have one sip because, you're starting all over again. Fear versus pride. Instead of saying, oh, I had a little sip, but you know what? I don't need to drink anymore. I have control over it, and I won't do it again. And if I do, we all make mistakes, and just let it slide. Admitting to your fault. It's wrong that I did that, and let's just move forward and try not to do it again. That's being the bigger person, such as with my 3 alcoholics, or even with Ken, as to being the bigger person and admitting to their faults. Also, when they do those actions or behaviors and not engaging in them, enabling them. So when we encourage and enable and all that stuff, making excuses based on the bullying cult clans, well, they're my friends, I gotta stay loyal, Yeah, they're really great friends, remember? Okay, so that's how that works based upon what I learned in Professor Dyer's class, my favorite teacher. It is important to understand why making labels, mental illnesses for things that humans are actually capable of controlling only gives us excuses and exceptions to do those unacceptable behaviors or actions. One huge flaw within the mental health field is that they have created many mental health conditions that are either not factual or only partially factual. The terms used to define these mental health conditions also play a huge role in making excuses and exceptions for unacceptable behaviors or actions. Let's first use the definition for narcissistic personality disorder. When you see the word disorder, most will automatically define it as something that we aren't able to control. So that term is actually defining it as a physical disease that causes one's personality to be narcissistic abusive, when factually there is no scientific facts to conclude that theory. The mental health field has also added more theories to this well-known mental illness, such as claiming that those who have been diagnosed with this mental illness are emotionally immature. Again, we are going back to sloppy, hypocritical ageism. These unproven theories are also being misused within society as a whole. Just like many use the word retard to refer to someone as being unintelligent, is the same as making excuses and exceptions for those who use unacceptable behaviors or actions by saying that they do them because they are emotionally immature. This is insulting to our youth because it actually does negatively affect them by using these excuses and exceptions for those who choose to use unacceptable behaviors or actions. Now that is very true, because when we say immature, most people automatically think of our youth. When we think of mature, the word mature. Yes, there's different definitions, but then again, we have to think about what most people think of when they hear that word. So I find it extremely important to make words and definitions to actually be logical and actually have facts in them and more understandable to society as a whole. In order for that to happen, though, we also have to understand the flaws that have been happening within society as a whole and within the mental health field, based upon how we teach others, not only the clients, but also current and future mental health professionals to see these flaws and actually hopefully make changes within the future. I'll be taking a stop right here for part 6 continued of conditioned normalized assholism syndrome, and I'll be continuing with this part and the next part 6 continued. I'm Shelley Rothus, and I'm a different kind of victim. See you next time.